in our families, in our communities, is the actual proof which many people, though they know it not in their conscious minds, are waiting for. And beyond this aspect of the transformation of our personal lives lies, of course, Nichiren Daishonin's will and testament, the great goal of Kosen Rufu, of establishing an eternally peaceful world through the change within human life. So, as you know, the fundamental basis of our practice is Jigyo and Keita. Practice for ourselves and practice for others. And this applies not only to our individual lives, but also on a collective basis to society as a whole. This is the meaning of Kosen Rufu, of course, the change in society itself. So, and as an individual, we may chant to the Gonzen, perhaps for harmony in our family. And we achieve it, and that is great. But we have to look beyond that to in a collective sense, to how we can begin to actually change society through the inner change in each individual. So our goals and determinations are not just confined to ourselves, and our problems, our family, our work, but also in general sense to our communities, our neighborhoods, our villages, towns, cities, whole country, whole world. So this is why Sensei, as a first goal, in the collective sense, in his speech at the general meeting of the SGI in Hawaii last summer, proposed that we should support the United Nations and through the pressure of ordinary people, eventually compel it to function within its charter, which is so great in itself. Most of you have now read it. This is based on the belief that the United Nations, in the end, is what human beings make it. So long as human beings are apathetic and do nothing, it'll be like it is now, and perhaps will get worse. But if human beings decide to change the United Nations, they can change it. And with the power of the Gonzen, we're the best people to take the lead in such a movement. We must change it, because it's the only nucleus of peace in the future. When Sensei was giving his lecture on the Risho Ankokuron, which is about 14 years ago now, he quoted a Japanese historian who had painstakingly worked out that between the years 1500 BC and 1860 AD, I don't know why he chose 1860, there had been no less than 8,000 treaties for peace negotiated in the world. And their duration had averaged in no more than 2 years. In other words, peace can never be attained through negotiation, through the work of politicians. It can only be achieved through the change in the heart of human beings, which is what our practice is all about. Now, of course, the reason why long-term peace has never been achieved is because of the incredible power of egoistic nationalism, which is motivated by those same three poisons that cause us so much trouble of greed, anger, and ignorance, which breeds fear. People refuse to believe that others have a right to be equal with them. This is a fact. This tendency arose even in the Falklands crisis. National arrogance and pride on both sides. People in their heads understand the equality of all races, don't they? And of all human beings, theoretically. But when it comes to the crunch and affects their own personal lives, they choose to become blind to that fact because of fear and lack of trust. When you think about it, nations are spending vast sums of money every day on armaments because of their suspicion and doubt about other human beings. Therefore, obviously, the most important thing for the world is the growth of and development of a philosophy and practice which is founded absolutely on equality and the dignity of life, and which gives the power to human beings to control the negative and destructive aspects of their minds. And I believe that nothing else has that power except Nichiren Buddhism and the Gohonzon. And I think you all agree with me, 100%. Only this power can create the unification of the human race. We often forget it, but our discussion meetings are, in fact, the crystallization, if you like, of a harmonious world in miniature. This is why they're so unique and great. They're beyond race, aren't they? Truly, a discussion meeting is a place where everybody, wherever they come from, whatever their age, whatever their color, whatever their cultural background, where everybody is truly equal. And a place where each human being respects the other, no matter what they look like, no matter what they say. And I believe this is what often impresses guests most when they first come to our meetings. This is the work of the Gohonzon, the power of the Gohonzon, revealing itself in our lives. So, of course, the only way to achieve this on a wider scale is through more Shakabuku. And we're incredibly fortunate to have such a mission and purpose in this world. In the Gosho, it states that inherent enlightenment appears in the forces, or the force, the universal force, called Bonten and Taishaku, whilst inherent ignorance is represented by the devil of the sixth heaven. This is in the old Buddhist terms. But the truth is that the leaders of this world are either one or the other. There really is no gray area. Either they have the good and valuable force of Bonten and Taishaku working in them, or they have the negative and destructive force of the devil of the sixth heaven. And it depends on what they base their lives and actions. If the philosophy on which they base their life and actions is not polluted by the three poisons of life, then Bonten and Taishaku will be at work in them. But if the three poisons are in the least working there, the devil of the sixth heaven takes over. So Shakyamuni predicted so long ago in the Lotus Sutra that as Kosen Rufu progresses, and this applies, of course, everywhere in the world, and in NSUK as well, many great leaders will appear in society who, through the practice to the Gohonzon, can overcome the three poisons and reveal their Buddha nature and lead people to happiness. 3,000 years ago, Shakyamuni stated that in the Lotus Sutra. So this is an incredible call, and out of many of us now and many more who will practice in the future, great leaders in all fields of society, science, in medicine, in politics, will appear at the appropriate time. So now let's read question 9.
With this, the guest moved off his mat in a gesture of respect, straightened the collar of his robe, and said, "The Buddhist teachings vary greatly, and it is difficult to investigate each doctrine in full. I have had many doubts and perplexities, and have been unable to distinguish reason from unreason. Nevertheless, this work by the Venerable Honen, the Senchaku Shu, does in fact exist, and it lumps together all the various Buddhas, sutras, bodhisattvas, and deities, and says that one should discard, close, ignore, and abandon them. The meaning of the text is perfectly clear. And as a result of this, the sages have departed from the nation. The benevolent deities have left their dwelling places. Hunger and thirst fill the world, and disease and pestilence spread abroad. Now, by citing passages from a wide variety of scriptures, you have clearly demonstrated the rights and wrongs of the matter. Therefore, I have completely forsaken my earlier mistaken convictions, and my eyes and my ears and eyes have been opened on point after point. There can be no doubt that the stability of the nation and the peace of the world are what all men, from the ruler down to the common people, long for and rejoice in. If we can quickly put an end to the alms that are given to these Ichantika, and ensure that continuing support is instead given to the host of true priests and nuns, if we can still these white waves that trouble the ocean of the Buddha, and cut down these green groves that overgrow the mountain of the law, then the world may become as peaceful as it was in the golden age of Fu Si and Shen Nung, and the nation may flourish as it did under the sage rulers Yao and Shun. After that, there will be time to dip into the waters of the law, and to decide which are shallow doctrines and which are deep, and to pay honor to the pillars and beams that support the house of the Buddha.
So as you can see, at last the guest is beginning to understand and accept what the host has been teaching to him. In other words, he's winning the battle of Shakabuku. And he realizes that the only way to save the nation at that time was to stop making offering to those who were teaching evil. Today, if you look at the whole world, the situation is, in a sense, quite similar, but on a much grander, a much larger, a much more horrifying scale. There are many, many, many religions, and even more cults throughout the world. And because of this, people are understandably very confused and suspicious on the whole of religion in general. They distrust religion, and especially they distrust more and more the way in which religions are run. There have been so many cases of extortion, enforced separation from families, brainwashing even, and worse still, horrors in the name of various cults and so-called religions. This situation, of course, has made it very difficult for people to decide or even to begin to understand what religion is all about. So the only way that we can convince people that what we practice is good and right and valuable and great is by showing the power of the Gohonzon. This is the unique asset which we have. This is why, in his Europe Day message, Sensei asks us to go out into society and give actual proof to an ever-widening circle of friends and acquaintances. This is our priceless treasure, isn't it? The Gohonzon and its great power. And this is undeniable through the actual experiences of millions of people in this world. It's about this that we should speak and lay emphasis on more than anything else in Shakabuku. Not empty theory, but actual proof of this power at work in our lives. No one else has the Gohonzon of the three great secret laws. This is why other religions must rely often on blind faith or on superstition, on instilling fear, or on downright trickery. This is such an incredible treasure. This is what we must emphasize, the Gohonzon at work in the lives of ourselves and our friends. So, of course, this is too why we need to open up our discussion meetings to a much wider selection of people. This is why I say, don't try to prejudge whether a person will practice or not. open our arms wide and bring anybody in who shows even the slightest glimmer of interest in coming, or the slightest glimmer of interest in making this world a better place to live in, or the slightest glimmer of interest in changing their unhappy circumstances. In Nagasaki, the sensei said, the spirit of Nichiren Daishonin, which we can realize through reading the Gosho, was never to lose a friend. Our spirit should be the same. Even if a person doesn't listen, even if they go away, let's keep in touch with them. Of course not every day or every week or even every month. But every so often, let's ring them up. Every so often, let's send them a UK Express. Every so often, let's remind them. And sometime, they may be ripe and ready to practice. So in this answer, the guest is really now getting quite enthusiastic and almost lyrical in his excitement. The world may become, he says, as peaceful as it was in the golden age of Puxi and Shen-no. So what is an ideal world? The higher religions in this world find it very difficult to describe this. And so usually it's proved to be a world apart from this world. A pure land or a utopia, paradise, or a heaven of some sort. And this applies to, of course, Hinayana Buddhism, provisional Mahayana teachings of Shakyamuni, as well as to the religions of the West. But the Lotus Sutra totally denies this concept. The Lotus Sutra makes 4 great points. The first is that this mundane world is itself the Buddha's land. And secondly, that everything depends on the life condition, the hearts and minds of the people. Thirdly, if those hearts and minds are filled with good fortune and wisdom, society will be a place of happiness and prosperity, and the land will be rich and fruitful. Fourthly, if that good fortune and wisdom is not there, evil will rule. There is no gray area, one or the other. In the Gosho, the person and the law, Nichiren Daishonin said, since the law is supreme, the person is worthy of respect. Since the person is worthy of respect, the land is sacred. When I was in Nagasaki, again, sorry this comes up so often, but I had so many experiences there. Some of you I may have told, Sensei had this talk with a number of the local dignitaries, and this included the Director General of the largest hospital there. And this doctor said to Sensei, who was showing him photographs of Russia, why is it that since the countryside of Russia is so beautiful, the people are so warlike? And Sensei replied, the Russian people are brought up amidst snow and ice for a large part of the year. I believe, he said, that they're very pure. This is why it has been so easy throughout history for power-hungry leaders to manipulate them. In other European countries, the people are more outspoken and critical of their leaders. One day, the Russian people will do the same. So in a society that is not based on the rock of the ultimate law of life, it's very easy for gentle or passive people to be led in a way that makes them little better than animals, totally controlled by government or by dictators, or indeed sometimes by power-hungry priests. Of course, people have always been striving for a paradise. In Europe, people believed, as religion lost its power, that this paradise could be achieved through reforming the social structure of countries, sharing everything, equality for all, and so on. It's led to socialism and communism. But these isms have not changed the happiness of the people. Still they suffer, as they always did. It doesn't change humanity. To establish happiness and prosperity for the people, there must be a philosophy that's absolutely rooted in humanity itself. And this, I believe, is the greatness and the universality of Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism. So it follows, doesn't it, that political science, if it is to give happiness to the people, must also have its roots in the philosophy that teaches the absolute dignity of life. So when I was in Japan last May, Sensei pointed out that because we found our lives on the mystic law, experiencing its power in our daily lives, we, quite ordinary people, can have the temerity to make determinations for 5, 10, or 20 years ahead. Just recently in Japan, they've all made 20-year determinations through to the 21st century. At the annual general meeting in November, I'm going to suggest we do the same. We can do such things, but what politician can really make a determination 10, 20, even 5 years ahead? Most of them are unable to think more than this year, or at least perhaps no further than the next general election. This is because the pressures of life confuse and upset, rock them off their feet. They have no philosophy on which to base their lives. They lack, therefore, the wisdom and courage to look so far ahead. And of course, we all suffer terribly as a result. Hemmed in by all these problems, they simply can't see a solution. Now, gradually now, of course, the people are becoming sovereign as democratic ways spread throughout the world. But even a democracy cannot function properly unless the people exercise their prerogative. That is to say, that they are prepared to think for themselves and they're prepared to make wise judgment on the issues of the day, and then have the courage to voice their views and make sure in one way or another that those views are heard. So, of course, through the wisdom and the courage that the Gohonzon gives one, there is no doubt that gradually such a human movement will arise everywhere, where people will truly be taking part in democratic procedures and the government of their land. But wisdom and courage is essential. And it's difficult to believe that that can come in sufficient force from anywhere else but practice to the Gohonzon. So those who practice to the Gohonzon, just as the Lotus Sutra said, will gradually become the leaders of society because people will see the wisdom of their actions, even though they can't bring themselves to practice. So I really hope, as I said before in these lectures, that many people in NSUK in the future will move out to play their part in politics, in their local communities, neighborhoods, take the lead and help people to find a happier way of life. So the ultimate purpose of politics, therefore, must be to save ordinary people from unhappiness, based on, of course, a spirit of true compassion or mercy. Sadly, at the moment, politicians still use people, still manipulate them for their own egoistic satisfaction. Often, I believe, in the case of our own country, quite unwittingly, not realizing the influence which the three poisons are having on their minds and their actions. So, to sum up, let's really determine to increase our shakabuku power so that we can get this movement advancing at a more rapid rate than it has up to this day. This is no criticism of anyone. Every movement has to begin. Every movement has to grow. But it must also gradually accelerate. Otherwise, it'll lose momentum when it hits obstacles and difficulties. So I really pray with my whole heart that more and more people will reveal their unique potential and put it into full action in society in whatever field they wish to do so. So in the perfect balance of Buddhism, we should also remember that Shakabuku is not just for others, but it's also for ourselves. It's not just for Kosen Rufu of the world. It's so that we can attain Buddhahood. That is the purpose of the whole practice. This great Gosho, the Risho Ankokuron, is all about slander. We too have slandered in past lives, and even perhaps today. We have hurt or harmed life in one way or another, perhaps persecuting or even thinking ill constantly of others. Worse still, if it's those who practice the Gohonzon. Slander is always the cause of the worst sufferings that we go through. We must learn to understand this. We can't hide a blind eye to the fact that we also have created deeply unhappy karma because we have slandered and harmed life, or worse still, that we have actually slandered the Gohonzon or believers in the Gohonzon in past lives. So if we've used our minds and our tongues and our bodies, i.e. our actions, for evil in such a way, what cause must we make in order to overcome that unhappy karma? It can only be to use our minds and our tongues and our bodies for good. And there is no greater good than being able to bring someone to the Gohonzon so that they too can begin to reveal their Buddha state and do their own human revolution. This is why Nichiren Daishonin taught that the only sure way to change karma is through Shakabuku. So we need to think of this and not gloss it over. It isn't just Shakabuku for this amazing dream of Kosen Rufu. It's Shakabuku too, so that we can overcome the effects of slander in our lives and find true happiness. So that message is my message of the month. Everywhere I go, I want people to understand this. Because we need that driving force, that understanding. That if we're going to change our karma, we have to use our minds, our tongues, and our bodies for good, for the greatest goodness, which is Shakabuku. Otherwise, we can never attain enlightenment, because we can never rid ourselves of whatever slander there may be in us. Of course, it varies. Some it may be heavy, some it may be lighter. But for sure, there's some slander there. I don't think any one single person in this room could say that they've never harmed or hurt anybody or life in general. Not one person. So this is the karma that we have to overcome, and we do it through Shakabuku. I hope that's really clear to everyone. Thanks very much for patiently listening. Many thanks.